Interesting topic. I've gotten questions about this before because I've kind of shared a little bit of my story with some folks in general. But if you are in your 30s, mid 30s, early 30s, late 30s, whatever that looks like, now is the time you need to start discussing estate plans with your parents. Now, calm down. I'm not saying go and be like the prodigal son. I'll be asking your father how many houses he has so you know what you stand to inherit. That is not what we're talking about here. Please don't be, help yourself. Don't be wise. Okay. Don't do that. So that's not what we're talking about. However, what I'm talking about is if you're in your 30s, I'd like to discuss, potentially how you can discuss estate plans with your parents. You understand? And the reason you want to do this is because if you're in your 30s, chances are your parents are in their 60s, So if your parents are like 55 and above, you need to start having those conversations with them, not because you want them to die, God forbid. That's not what we're talking about here. However, you do want to know what their wishes are and if they even have their estate in order. Now, you might say, what's the big deal, whatnot. I just want you to, for me, after this live, just go and Google celebrities, for example, whose estates have not settled. You understand? So some people have been dead several years, but because people are fighting over their estates, nobody has eaten from that estate yet. And it's not even about the eating, it's about the allowing the soul to rest. You understand? So, for example, if your parents have, for example, children that are underage, let's say you're the firstborn, you're in your 30s, you have younger siblings, or for example, you have a sibling that has, some sort of developmental disability, for example, what's your parents' plan for the person? So, what we're going to talk about right now is basically how to discuss those sort of concepts with your parents. Now, I'll share a little bit of my story. So, as most of you know, both of my parents have passed away. They both passed away pretty young. It was not part of their plan, you know. Thankfully, my dad was a lawyer, and because I had proven myself, for lack of a better words. Okay, I guess we can just go right into it. I'll share the story as I go through. Um, okay, so I'm hearing in my spirit to actually share the story first. Okay, so basically, I had those conversations with my dad before he passed, right? We were not planning on him dying. His death was actually, it caught us off guard. But because I had been having those conversations with him, he actually made some moves that really ended up helping us as his children, when things happened. He had his house in order, so there was no guessing, there was no worrying, there was no, oh, what did he have here or what did he have there? What did he have everywhere? You know, so let's get right into it and discuss how to discuss with your parents, especially if your parents have, in my opinion, if they're 55 and above and you are in your 30s, please, those are the two qualifications, right? And again, I know maturity is not by age, is not by whatever, but the very first thing you definitely want is to have some sort of maturity and independence about you. So, for example, if you are still eating at your parents' table, you understand, it might not be wise to have this conversation with them because then you're just going to look like the prodigal son and you're waiting for them to buy. And, that's just not going to be a good look. You understand? But however, if you've shown to a large extent you're a responsible person, you've weaned yourself off of your parents, and you're genuinely just concerned because, for example, you have no idea, the far reaches of your parents, careers or businesses or whatnot, if you just don't know if they've not carried you along. You understand? Because most times the average adult just goes about not exactly planning that anything will happen to them. You understand? So the very first thing I would say is make sure you're a responsible person and you've proven to your parents without a reasonable doubt to a large extent that you are responsible. Responsibility means different things to different people. So responsibility could be you're no longer depending on them financially. That is definitely a requirement. You should not, if you're depending on your parents financially, do not have this conversation with them. um, so let's get into how you can actually have those conversations with them. So the very first thing you want to do is you want to ask them just questions in general, in terms of do they have a will? You know, do they have a will? That's the very first thing. Especially if your parents live in North America or if they frequent North America, even if they are in Nigeria, make sure they have a will. And make sure, especially if they are in Nigeria, that the will is filed officially with the courts. Because if it is not, it's just paper, it's dust. You understand? But if it's actually filed officially with the courts, then it can hold up. You understand? So you want to make sure they have a will. You understand? A will that lists all their assets, all their liabilities, and what their wishes are for everybody in general. You understand? So when I would have this conversation with my dad, I would just ask him, like, oh, daddy, I've just been reading a lot about all this personal finance stuff and reading about estate planning and all these things. And I just thought I would have that conversation with you. Do you have a will? What are your wishes? You don't have to discuss it with me. And I would tell him all that. You don't have to tell me. You don't have to discuss it with me. I just want to make sure that you have everything in place such that if anything were to happen to you, we would know what you want. We would know what you would have wanted to happen, you know? And my dad took the conversation very well. So he actually would open up and talk to me about stuff. You understand? And of course, he had seen that I was responsible and he had seen that indeed I was learning on some of these things. So that's how you would approach the question, that you've just been doing some stuff for even your own self. For example, let's say, for example, my husband and I, when we were working on our will and just our estate in general, that's a good opportunity to talk to your parents about it and be like, oh, hey dad, hey mom, me and my wife, me and my husband, we were working on our will and power of attorney and whatnot. And we just wanted to find out if you and dad have the same thing. If you don't, we highly recommend, because no offense, your parents will not want to take advice from you. So I would suggest not giving them financial advice to a large extent, but just asking them if they have it, if they don't have it, how to get it and why it is important, so that those that they leave behind will know what their wishes are. Ask them if they have a will. Do they have life insurance? You understand? Things like that. What sort of assets do they have? What do they want to happen to those assets when they go? If anything were to happen to them, for example, what are their wishes for your younger siblings? For example, someone like me, I had a minor that's as a younger sibling, and my dad put it in there clear as day. This is what I want to happen in order to be able to take care of the minor amongst us. You understand? We have a question here. What if they had both assets and debts? How do you deal with the debts if they willed all the assets to you, especially if the negative far outweighs the assets? That's a very good question. So I would clarify something. So this conversation is not about inheritance. I don't know why I feel the need to say that. Let's start from there. This conversation is not about inheritance. It's about making sure that um whatever their wishes are gets taken care of when they go, and to make sure that they have everything in writing such that no one can bamboozle you. For example, I'm the executor of my father's estate. He wrote everything down. So nobody can come tomorrow and say my father owes them 2 million naira, because I know it does not exist. So I will not be running from pillar to post and put myself under pressure. You understand? So if the debts outweigh the assets, that's okay. There's nothing wrong. The person that is the owner of the assets and the debts is who is responsible, not you, the child. You understand? So the estate is what will be in debt, not you. You understand? And those are the reasons why you want to have some of those conversations, because you want to know what you're going to have to deal with if anything happens to them. And keep in mind, they don't have to give you any details. So you're not asking this conversation to be all up in their business. You understand? You're just, it's like it's like sowing seeds. You're just throwing the seed there. How it germinates is not up to you. You're just going to throw it out there like, hey dad, or hey mom, I've been learning a lot about finance and learning a lot about estate planning. And, I just want to find out if you guys have this, that, and the other thing. If you don't, I think it's a really good thing to get. Even me, myself, I'm getting it. And then you kind of discuss from there. And that opens up, this is not a one-day conversation. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a conversation you will sprinkle some dust in Easter, then you sprinkle some other dust, maybe at Thanksgiving, then more at Christmas. And it slowly but surely starts to open the door. For example, for me, I started having this conversation with my dad. It was over a rolling 3-year period before he finally passed away. And the year before he passed away was when he opened up a lot of stuff and just said, okay, this, that, and the other thing. Because we had been having those conversations, he could see, he could trust me. So even some of his investment plans, some investment he wanted to do just before he passed away, he discussed them with me, and I told him, this word, I don't think it makes sense. And thankfully, he listened and he didn't go through with it. He had no idea he was going to pass away the year after. If he had done that investment, his entire estate would have been in trouble. You understand? So again, to answer your question, Michael, um how so basically, if the debt outweigh the assets, it's not necessarily going to be your problem, because the estate of that person is what the debtors will have to go after, not you. And that's why you want to make sure your parents have it in writing, because if you're, for example, the inheritor of the estate, and let's say the estate has debt, you understand, those, I don't want to go into all that in this call just because of time, but you just want to make sure that and you know what their wishes are to deal with it, you know. Especially in a place like Nigeria, when somebody dies, some people will come out of the woodworks that you did not expect, wanting to do things with your parents' estate. Anyways, I hope that answers your question, but thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Okay. So that's, talking to your parents about estate plans about their estate in general, asking them if they have a will. The biggest thing is they should have a will, and they should register that will with the courts. You understand? If they're in a country like Nigeria where it's required to be registered with the courts, like make sure they have their wishes in writing. They don't even have to discuss it with you. Just make sure they have it in writing what their wishes are. If they don't have life insurance, make sure they don't have to get life insurance if they don't want to. For example, if the estate is, you know, endowed enough, they don't necessarily need it. But just make sure they have a plan and they've written down their wishes, what they want to happen. That's the biggest thing, that they write down what they want to happen. Again, if they are 55 and over, just have it written down. And then for those of us that are on this call that are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever age you are, especially if you have people that are financially dependent on you, you need to have a will, you need to have life insurance. Okay? So go and get that done. Don't wait till you're 55 and your children have to discuss it with you, because I've discussed it with you today. Okay?